Good evening. So some of you are familiar faces and you know that each of these I've put in my plug for being prepared. And last week we got to test it all, right? Everybody took their little booklets home, found their zones, got all prepared, have their kits, and are ready for the next one. We don't end hurricane season until November 30th. And then we roll right into nor'easter season. So water everywhere, which is why these have been such valuable events throughout the summer. And Councilwoman Henley is very right. Educating ourselves on this is the best thing we can do to help spread the word and understanding of this as we move through the understanding of sea level rise, recurrent flooding, and how to combat this, live with it, and grow our city. So tonight we're talking about stewards of the Southern Watershed, and we are going to start out with Ms. Stacey Feken. Ms. Feken holds a Master's degree of Science in Marine Science from the University of Georgia and a Bachelor of Science in Zoology from Louisiana State University. She's currently the Policy and Engagement Manager for the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership, also known as APNEP. She focuses on partnership building, raising awareness about APNEP and the estuarian ecosystem, and coordinating restoration, policy, and programmatic support activities. Her background includes over 15 years of experience implementing ecosystem restoration, water resources, and ecological research programs in Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida, including comprehensive Everglades restoration plan. Please welcome Ms. Feken.
Well, hello and welcome. Again, I'm Stacey Feken. I'm the Policy and Engagement Manager with the Albemarle-Pamlico National Estuary Partnership, or APNEP as we like to call it for short. I just wanted to thank the City of Virginia Beach for having us today and for inviting us to participate in these discussions. We're really excited about the momentum around these talks and the symposium that was held back in April. And it's really timely with some of the efforts and initiatives that we've been working on. So we're excited to be here and glad to be part of these discussions. And so I just wanted to make a note. You've heard from a number of experts in some of the other talks, and you've heard some really detailed technical presentations. Mine won't be like that. So I will show you a lot of pretty pictures and just kind of give a high-level overview of some of the activities that we're involved with, what we're all about, and hopefully spark some ideas for potential future collaboration opportunities. So hopefully by the end of this discussion, we'll be able to convince you, if you're not already aware, that all of Virginia is not in the Chesapeake watershed. Something we're hearing from partners in this part of the world is that tends to be an assumption. But in fact, depending on where you live in this area of Virginia Beach, you may be in fact located or live within the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system in that watershed. So basically our goal here today is to help the city and help constituents in this area raise awareness that actions in the southern watersheds can impact the sounds downstream, and you're a part of that ecosystem. Sorry, I'm just getting So basically, we just want to, spark some ideas for ways that we can work together, and again, just raising that awareness that you're part of our watersheds as well. So this is also a timely event. We're actually in the middle of Estuaries Week. This is an annual event held in September every year. You can visit this website for more information. They even have an interactive map of events and opportunities to volunteer within your area. Unfortunately, a lot of the events in our area were canceled due to Florence, both anticipation of the storm coming in and then some folks that are actually dealing with the aftermath. But something to be in mind, this event is held every year. I'm not getting this to come up. But part of the role of Estuaries Week is also to serve as educating elected officials about the importance of estuaries. And so it's raising awareness not only with the public, but with elected officials as well. So I didn't want to make the assumption that you know what an estuary is, and this seems like an informed and educated audience, but I wanted to provide just a simple illustration and overview because a lot of people aren't familiar with the actual term estuary. Most are familiar with what it's called locally, whether it's a bay, a lagoon, a harbor, or sounds as we call them in our estuarine system. So, just a quick illustration overview. Essentially, estuaries and their surrounding wetlands are the special places where rivers meet the sea, and the fresh water from the rivers mixes with the ocean waters. And just to give you a few more pictures with an overview of that, the illustration in the top right is another just kind of simplistic overview of a diagram of what an estuary is, and it's actually a good illustration of the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system, showing, which is called a barbell estuary. So it shows the barrier islands and the tidal inlet. And as you've heard in other presentations, the first open connection to the sea within the system is at Hatteras Island. So there's a long way to go before the riverine system actually mixes with the open ocean. And so on the top left is actually an aerial view of Back Bay and Currituck Sound, and that bottom left shows the inlet at Hatteras Island. And I'm not actually sure what the bottom right one is, so I can't remember. So just to give you another aerial overview of the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system, it's the second largest estuarine system in the lower 48 states. And you may be familiar with that other estuary, as we like to call it, to the north, the Chesapeake Bay. And that's actually another reason we're here today and talking with partners. There's not as much awareness about our system, even though we are a large system, but there's just not a lot of awareness about the system in general. And we hear from partners here in Virginia that a lot of that attention is placed on Chesapeake Bay, and that's where the resources and the awareness and and some of the funding goes towards. So hopefully in raising awareness about the Albemarle-Pamlico system and your connections to it, we can look for opportunities to change that. And as you're familiar, Virginia Beach is actually uniquely positioned between the two and connected to both. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. So again, just another aerial overview. The APES system is a complex estuarine system. It's actually a network of 8 major sounds. We have the Back, Bow, Core, Croatan, Currituck, Roanoke, and then the two major sounds for which the system is named, the Albemarle and the Pamlico. And the entire system is interconnected, and it's drained by 6 major river basins. And it's considered a semi-enclosed lagoonal system. And all of this water makes up approximately 3,000 square miles of open water. So this is another overview of the system, and it actually shows the connections with Virginia in a little bit more detail. So there's over 28,000 square miles of land that drain into the sounds, and it drains through more than 10,000 miles of rivers and streams. And again, there's 6 major river basins: the Chesapeake, the Pasquotank, the Roanoke, the Tar-Pamlico, the Neuse, and portions of the White Oak and Carteret County. And I've talked with a number of people in this area. I realize you may be thinking of things in terms of what's in your backyard or where you like to visit, whether it's Back Bay, Currituck Sound, the North Landing River. And we'll talk a little bit more about that and how things are categorized at the local level in a minute. But essentially for us, for your area of the watershed draining into our system, it's enclosed within the Pasquotank River Basin. So the Pasquotank, the Chelan, and the Roanoke are the three river basins that originate in Virginia, and they flow into Albemarle Sound. And the Pamlico, and the Neuse flow into Pamlico Sound. And then you have the White Oak Basin flowing into Pamlico Sound as well, through a series of some of the other sounds. So why is the system important? Why are estuaries important? Why should we care? So estuaries are commonly known as the nurseries of the sea. They're among the most productive ecosystems in the world. There's a variety of habitats within estuaries that provide protection from predators and abundant sources of food for juvenile fish and wildlife and even sharks. This is an image that always comes to mind for me. You heard that I received my master's from the University of Georgia. I spent hours in tidal creeks catching white shrimp with a cast net. So I've seen all the other critters that are in the marsh, and it's until you see that and see what's underneath the water, and some of you may fish and enjoy recreating in these waters. Sometimes it's hard to envision what these systems look like and how they can be that productive. So I want to talk a little bit about the value of estuaries. We actually commissioned a study through the RTI. Well, we didn't request for proposals, and RTI International responded to it, but it's called the Economic Valuation of the Albemarle-Pamlico Watershed, and that was released in 2016. And we have copies of that available on our website, and be happy to direct anyone towards it. But they took a look at some existing data and just tried to put some values on the resources within the system. And so some of the subsequent slides will talk a little bit more about that, but just some of the common ecosystem services or the benefits that natural systems provide to humans. Some of the common ecosystem services that you hear about with estuaries are the estuarine system and wetlands act as natural filters of pollutants. They provide protection from floods and storms, and that they reduce shoreline erosion. And so what the report tried to estimate, they were again looking at available data, but one of the sources they looked at was gathering the economic benefits associated with fishing, hunting, and wildlife viewing. And for that entire system that I just showed you, a few minutes ago, they estimated that there are annual benefits that exceed $3.7 billion from these activities combined. So that's just an example of some of the value of the system and how people are using the system. And one thing I wanted to mention here, the picture of the tundra swans. Estuaries are also, especially our estuarine system, is known for being overwintering grounds, especially around Lake Mesquite, Currituck Sound. So it's a special area, and there are species which you can see as they're migrating through. And so within that estimate, they also found that there's an annual value of over $640 million for visits to national seashores, wildlife refuges, and state parks. And estuaries provide a number of different tourism and recreational opportunities. I'm sure some of you visit the Outer Banks and vice versa. People come up here and visit this portion of the system as well. This is just a snapshot of some of the activities that occur in estuarine systems. So another category that they looked at was the value to humans of the preservation of habitat for non-game wildlife species. And they estimated that ranged from 133 to 202 million per year. And estuaries and the watersheds that flow into them are just teeming with life. It's not just the creeks, the tidal creeks and the bays and the lagoons themselves. If you take a look at the landscape and the landscape that the rivers are flowing through, they provide an amazing habitat for diverse species of fish and wildlife. And the Albemarle-Pamlico system is home to actually more than 200 species of animals and 300 species of plants. And unfortunately, some of them are at risk or not extinct. one of the more commonly known ecosystem benefits is that estuaries are a source support commercial and recreational fisheries. I mentioned earlier they're considered the nurseries of the sea. And I also mentioned I studied white shrimp, so that's frankly one of the reasons why I'm in this business. I like to eat shrimp, I like to eat fish, and I decided to make a career out of it, and protecting the habitats that support these industries are important to me, and they're important probably to a lot of you as well. But it's estimated, and this is a national value, this is not from the RTI report, but it's generally estimated that over 75% of commercial and recreationally caught fish species that migrate up and down the Atlantic seaboard rely on the estuarine system at some portion of their life cycle. And that includes, for our system, some of those species include striped bass, summer flounder, blue crab, and shrimp. And for some, just knowing that estuaries exist is enough. The aesthetic value of the landscape and the areas within. But economists have tried to place a dollar value on that, and actually the RTI report goes into that in some form or fashion, at least what they were able to provide data on. But I would encourage you to read that, because those numbers can be a little harder to tease out and try to summarize. So that was just a really kind of quick overview and tour through some of the value and benefits that estuaries provide. I could probably talk all day about this. I'm sure some of you in the room could as well. But the bottom line is that estuaries are special places, and this picture also provides a snapshot of the diversity of estuaries around the nation. I have this poster in my office, and I think they're able to still get copies of it. I think it's an EPA or NOAA publication. But it's just an example. If you really start to dig within the different habitats and estuaries around the U.S., they're all very unique, and again, just special places. So in recognition of that, existing at a national level, I'll talk a little bit more about our program and why we exist. So Congress created the National Estuary Program in 1987. And so our system, the Albemarle-Pamlico Estuarine System, was designated as an estuary of national significance in 1987. And there are currently 28 national estuary programs around the country, and we're all established under Section 320 of the Clean Water Act. We were actually established after the Chesapeake Bay program and the Great Lakes program, and our model and mechanisms are somewhat modeled after theirs. But our program is funded by EPA through a grant to the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality, actually considered our host agency. But we have a different guiding structure, which I'll talk a little bit more in a minute. And we just celebrated our 30th anniversary last year. So our mission is to identify, restore, and protect the significant resources of the Albemarle-Pamlico Estuarine System. And some of you, if you've been following this or are familiar with our program, we were originally known as the Albemarle-Pamlico Estuarine Study, or APES. And most people that I talk to are familiar with that instead of our current name and the partnership that we've evolved into. But originally the focus was on establishing a baseline and doing research and monitoring studies to document the value of the system. And we still do that to some extent. But historically, we've also supported applied science initiatives meant to inform environmental decision making. And overall, the goal is to work towards inclusive, collaborative, and consensus-driven initiatives. And more recently, we've transitioned to an ecosystem-based management approach. I have a colleague that can talk to you about this all day. If you're interested, we can have them come back and talk about that. But suffice to say that the take-home point from here, just the EBM approach recognizes that humans are part of the system. So humans are part of both the problems and the solutions to protecting and identifying and restoring our ecosystems. So just a little bit about how we work. National estuary programs are locally based, stakeholder-driven, non-regulatory programs. We're called a boundary organization. Our role is to promote information sharing between scientists and decision makers. And some of the stakeholders that are involved with our program are citizens, scientists, private sector, interest groups, non-governmental organizations, and all levels of government, federal, state, and local government. And the idea is that partners are then involved in the decision making that benefits the region and the estuarine system. And we have a series of committees and teams that guide our priorities and focus. So this is just a quick overview of that committee structure. I'm not going to go into the detail associated with that, but yeah, I mentioned that DEQ is our host agency, where our guidance and direction actually comes from what's called our management conference. And some form of a management conference is required of all NEPs from EPA. And our overarching guidance comes from what's known as our leadership council. Actually, Dr. Tom Allen sits on our leadership council, who will be speaking after me, and he's actually the most recent chair of that board. And we also have a set of science and technical advisory committees and implementation advisory committees and a number of topic-focused teams. In the past, some of you may have been involved or familiar with. We had river basin councils, citizen advisory committees, but more recently we're trying out this approach of topic-based teams, evaluating submerged aquatic vegetation, oyster restoration, environmental education, just to name a few. But one takeaway point is that there are opportunities to get involved, and if you want to participate and be part of that management conference, please talk to me. I will be happy to recruit you. And there are a number of teams that you can pick from, and other ways to get involved as well. So who sits on all of these committees? I mean, that didn't even go into the detail of some of the committee structure that sits underneath that. But yeah, this is just kind of a snapshot of some of the partners that we've been involved with over time. And again, our role is to coordinate, synthesize, and bring these groups of people together. We're not the only ones doing that, but that is the way that we're structured and the way that we're set up. And so it's finding people within common interests and common goals, and ultimately with the common goal of improving the sounds. So this is just a brief snapshot. We do have a strategic plan. It's known as a comprehensive conservation and management plan. It was developed in 2012 and it spans through 2022. And it contains 58 actions that cover everything from land conservation to water quality, sea level rise and climate change. You name it, it's in there. We like to joke that everything is a priority in this plan. But those teams are responsible for really taking this and breaking that down and trying to figure out, what the priorities and the focus and the action should be moving forward. This just gives you kind of the full scope of everything that we can work with. So pretty much anything we get involved with has to, the projects and initiatives that we either fund or sponsor or get involved with have to align with the objectives and goals that are listed in that strategic plan. And the plan wasn't developed in a vacuum. There's actually a group of stakeholders who participated in its development, and they looked at all of the existing plans that they could find in the region, and did a survey. And the goal was to try and identify gaps and avoid duplication of effort. And ultimately, another charge was to find out where we may be able to leverage financial resources or other types of in-kind services and support, and work together to achieve the goals in their plans and ours. And in some cases, we just support partners that are working on their plans. We write letters of support. We may provide staff time or other ways to support partners in what they're doing. And we're constantly going through an adaptive management process where we assess the progress and needs in the region, and talking with partners and seeing if we're going down the right path. So again, just kind of getting back to that watershed idea and watershed connection. Even though we're an estuarine and a coastal system, don't just work at the coast. We take a watershed approach to estuarine protection, which means that we can work anywhere within the basins that drain into the sounds. And as you see here, so this covers the management region and the watersheds. The Roanoke is actually not considered, the upper Roanoke, the Virginia portion of the Roanoke is not considered part of our management system, but the Pasquotank and the Chowan are. So water from 43 North Carolina counties and 38 Virginia counties and cities drain into the sounds. And because of that management region that I just mentioned, there's only 19 Virginia counties and cities that are included in the management region. We use the county-city designation, I guess because of Virginia Beach, since y'all are a city and a county, and I think there are a few others that fall in that category as well. So, what do we share? Besides history and borders and and the swamp. So, what are some of the other things that we share? So, I actually have some colleagues that thought our only connection to Virginia Beach was through the Intercoastal Canal. But with the knowledge that Virginia Beach is the county and the city are one and the same, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. The Intercoastal Waterway does hydrologically connect the two systems. So regardless of where you are in the Virginia Beach area, that is a direct connection to both systems. And digging in a little bit more at the local level, so over half the water entering Albemarle Sound comes from Virginia. And so again, it's just a reminder, upstream actions affect that downstream water and the ecological health of the estuarine system. And the picture on the bottom right, it actually goes into more detail of the Chowan system and the tributaries that flow into it, the Blackwater, the Waterway, and the Heron. And then it features the Roanoke as well. But the picture on the left goes into, it's a little fuzzy, but a little bit more detail about some of the waterways that drain directly into the Albemarle-Pamlico system. And then digging in a little bit more at the local level, I believe this photograph actually comes from some of your local watershed and water resource management plans. But what you classify as the southern watersheds in Virginia Beach, are directly connected to the Albemarle-Pamlico estuarine system. And again, going back to those that scale idea of how we categorize things, we include these areas within the Pasquotank River Basin. And from what I've seen in the Virginia publications, this area is classified or categorized as the Albemarle Sound Coastal Watershed. But so you may be more familiar again with what's in your backyard and areas you like to recreate in. But from my understanding, there are definitely people in the room that are more qualified to talk about this than me, but the southern watersheds include the North Landing River, the Northwest River, and Back Bay. So again, why are we here? Since we're connected and the watersheds are connected, we actually have a long history of collaboration with Virginia. This picture shows the signing ceremony from a 2001 Memorandum of Agreement that was signed between what was formerly Division of Environment and Natural Resources on our end and the Division of Conservation and Recreation and what's now known as Natural Resources on your end. We have advisory committee members from Virginia. We have historically had a position in the Virginia TEQ Tidewater Regional Office since the early 90s. And just something that may be of interest to this group, there was a Back Bay Symposium in 1990, and I know we participated in that in some capacity. And so more recently, we signed a Memorandum of Understanding between the two states in 2017. So we've been working recently to reinvigorate and revive these partnerships and relationships. And we help facilitate this new memorandum of agreement or understanding between the agencies. So between what's now known as the North Carolina Department of Environmental Quality on our side, and again, your Secretary of Natural Resources, which covers both conservation and recreation and the Department of Environmental Quality on the Virginia side. And so the goal of that MOU is to foster interstate collaboration in our shared waterways, and with the ultimate goal of improving and maintaining the health system in the shared waterways between the two states. And just quick overview of some of the topics. That the MOU is very short. I think the city actually has a link to it on their website. But it just gives a high-level overview of some of the topics that were agreed upon, that issues that were named in the basin, and things that we might be able to work on and collaborate with each other. And they range from coastal resilience issues, which is a feature in this series and Symposium talks. Fish habitat and passage, I didn't really go into detail, but a lot of naturalist fish species use the river basins that are in this area, if you're familiar with shad and herring. So there's a lot of issues associated with that in terms of water quality and dams, impeding the fish, their ability to get up the rivers to spawn. There's invasive species issues. So again, it covers a number of different topics. There's a number of different ways that we can possibly work together moving forward. So I'm just going to give a quick snapshot of some of our partner initiatives, and I'm hoping this is enough of a highlight to spark some ideas and just, again, give ideas of ways we can work together. And I'll get more into some Virginia-specific examples in a minute. We have a long-standing Submerged Aquatic Vegetation partnership, and it has included members and representatives from Virginia, with Back Bay National Wildlife Refuge and others. And their current focus has been mapping the extent of the SAV resources in the Sounds. The map actually says North Carolina, but I know they've gone up into Back Bay and other areas as well. So again, they're trying to develop baseline data so that we can detect changes in the system and trends over time. And so they're doing a series of studies, doing aerial surveys, they do in-water surveys, they're using side-scan sonar techniques employed from a boat. But they're trying to establish a signal monitoring network so we can detect those changes over time. North Carolina has a coastal habitat protection plan that is mandated by state law. And so this is another collaborative initiative looking at protecting all the different estuarine habitats and habitats that are important to both commercially and recreationally important species of fish. My colleague Jenny Johnson is the coordinator for that, and he sits on a number of different committees and task forces. They're involved in leading that effort. And I mentioned the indigenous fish species issues. A lot of the species that reside in our system don't live there. Throughout the year, they migrate in and out of the system. So he and a couple of other colleagues also sit on a number of different interstate fishery management councils and teams. And I understand more recently there's a Virginia ALOSA task force that's been formed to coordinate across state lines and look at some of those indigenous fish species issues. You've heard a lot about the forest and protection, the importance of protecting forests in the watershed from Brian Van Eerden with the Nature Conservancy. So I put this in here as an example. We've had partnerships with the Division of Forestry on the North Carolina side and have funded projects that involve water quality protection, using bridge mat crossings on forestry operations, and also just environmental education initiatives. There's a watershed or river basin deck that's located at the Clemens State Forest in North Carolina. We're involved in some oyster restoration efforts. There was another economic study done on the benefits, costs and benefits associated with oyster restoration. I won't go into the detail associated with that, but that study was actually used to advocate for funding at the state level for restoration efforts in the state, and they were successful in doing that. We hope to continue. There's a collaborative oyster steering committee that works throughout North Carolina. We've historically been involved in a number of environmental education initiatives, everything from doing demonstration projects in schoolyards to actual restoration activities. We fund teacher education, workshops, and other initiatives. And one of our longstanding partnerships on the bottom right is the Shad in the Classroom program with the Museum of Natural Sciences. It's a successful program that is in coordination also with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and other agencies working to restore some of these fish populations. And lesson plan, the center is an example of some lesson plans that we've done in the past. We've been involved in water quality monitoring efforts. This is a partnership with USGS. I know you heard from someone from USGS during one of the talks. But they worked with us and our network of partners to synthesize existing data and then go out and establish some monitoring networks in Albemarle Sound and portions of your watershed. Have done work with invasive species management and monitoring of hydrilla and outreach activities. There are actually some citizen groups in the Chesapeake Basin that are working on that and other areas around the state. And one of the teams that I mentioned is dealing with invasive species, and their current focus is actually seeking a federal approval of an aquatic nuisance species management plan. But that's another potential example of something we can work on. So getting back to the specifics of our Virginia partnerships, I mentioned management conference members that were involved. Our current leadership council chair is Dr. Kirk Havens of the Virginia Institute of Marine Science, and Carl Hirschner also with VIMS, and I mentioned Dr. Allen. You're going to hear from him in a minute. In the past, on these various teams and committees, we've had members representing different state agencies, some private organizations, nonprofit organizations. Jeff Turner with the Blackwater Waterway Riverkeeper was involved, and many, many more. I mentioned the position in the Tidewater Regional Office that actually been vacant for a couple of years, but we're excited. I just heard 2 weeks ago that they've hired for that position, and Stephen Hummel will be our new liaison in that office. So we look forward to working with him, and there may be potential collaboration efforts associated with that as well, having someone kind of ingrained in that office and working locally. One initiative we've been involved with for over a decade, although it's not currently active, is the Albemarle-Pamlico Watershed Roundtable. And the roundtables are actually Virginia-based organizations, and I believe they're funded through DEQ through grants from EPA. I'm not sure if there's an analogous roundtable that covers this watershed. I've been trying to find that out, so if anyone knows, let me know. But we were heavily involved in that group when it was active, and there were actually a number of different initiatives that came out of that. But that is a collaborative group working locally to protect water in the Chesapeake River Basin. And I know Brian Vanier that you heard from, he was a member of that group. Other members, Cooperative Extension Agents, Soil and Water Conservation Districts, Virginia Division of Forestry, and others. So we're hoping that group gets some funding and momentum to get back up and running, and if there's an analogous group in this area, or if we want to start one, that might be something to consider. And so a lot of these were through the relationships built during the roundtable efforts, but I mentioned we had done some school demonstration projects. I just wanted to point out, one was here in Virginia Beach at Red Mill Elementary. There was a buffer demonstration, riparian buffer demonstration project that was done. But there were oil and tire recycling efforts, outdoor classrooms and nature trails, development of lesson plans, and there's a Chesapeake River Basin brochure. I actually have some copies with me that were done for the Virginia portion of the Chesapeake Basin. And we have a series of river basin publications on the North Carolina side. We've actually been talking with Lynn Haven River now because they're interested in developing they were already working on developing a set of brochures and for this area. So we're hoping we might be able to work together with them on that, because from what we have found, nothing exists in your basins. So there was also river stays and other outreach opportunities that were done through that group. So this was an online ecosystem assessment tool that, with the Virginia VIMS, analyzing existing data sets and trying to find a way to make the data more accessible and more readily accessible through an online format. And it also, toyed with the idea, or actually went into trying to share data and information across state lines. And that's an effort, part of a broader effort that we're involved with, looking at the health of the ecosystem as a whole. We've been involved since we're not far from Langley. There's a NASA Develop program, and I believe it's an undergraduate initiative, but this, without going into the detail, this project just looked at wetland health in the system, and so there's initiatives and things like that that we could do to kind of get an assessment of the health of different ecosystems in our area. We've partnered with a number of different people on restoration efforts in Dismal Swamp at both the State Park in North Carolina and the National Wildlife Refuge, which spans both states. So there's been hydrologic restoration efforts and Atlantic white cedar restoration efforts in the park. You heard the islets, Tim and Michelle were actually at the April Symposium. That's them on the left. They coordinate a lot of those activities at the local level and bring in volunteers. We basically paid for some trees, and volunteers came in and planted them, and including the picture on the bottom right is a number of Navy guys from Norfolk that came down to help out. They heard about it on one of the swamp tours and came back to help. But the hydrologic restoration was a much larger effort with a number of different partners, including the Nature Conservancy and NC State and others. This is something that's definitely more locally. I don't have all of the details, but we provided some funding for planning efforts associated with the Virginia Watersheds Southern Watershed Area Management Program. And my understanding is some of this has been used for some of your current watershed management plans, or it's at least evolved into or been utilized in local ordinances and other plans. But something else I'm trying to find out a little bit more about. So if anyone knows, I'd love to talk more with you. But another aspect of that, I believe what it evolved out of this effort was the Green Sea, Blueway, and Greenway Management Plan. And I think that, just another analogous effort. And we participated in committees associated with that or something. So with all those examples, just to kind of, again, just give a highlight of some of the things that we've worked on with partners in this area over time. Again, hoping we can spark some ideas. How can we work together moving forward in these shared waterways? And then going back to that memorandum of understanding, some of the things that we've been brainstorming over the past year and trying to work towards, just simple data and information sharing. It's you think it would be simple, but it's not always simple to work across silos within agencies, and you add in the interstate component of that. I didn't even go into the fact that we cross 2 different EPA regions, 2 different Fish and Wildlife Service regions, and a number of other institutions at other levels. So it can be challenging to share some of that information. So we're just trying to work on breaking down those silos and opening up those lines of communication. Maps, but there aren't that many maps that actually cross the state boundaries. One of our colleagues created this one, but most of the ones you see on our end stop at your border and vice versa. So we'd like to work together on creating more maps that actually represent this area and the connections between the 2 states. There was some talk of getting a task force together to implement this MOU. Those conversations are still being held at very high levels, but I'm interested in carrying this momentum forward. And if anybody is interested in having these discussions, come talk to me. I hope we can get something together. Having joint scientific meetings and conferences, just that, again, that information sharing is very important. And that's where the recent efforts of the city to host the Albemarle, the North Landing Environmental Symposium back in April, and hosting these series of talks, they are important and go a long way towards providing some of that momentum for these collaborative efforts. Working together on educational materials, something we've done in the Trelawney Basin, and hopefully we can do more of that here. And bottom line, just fostering regional stewardship. And awareness of the region and ways that we can work together moving forward. I have a few slides of just some recent hot topics. If you're not aware, there have been recent algal blooms in the Chewan that are occurring at least the last 3 or 4 years that hadn't occurred in 20 years. And something we've helped with is just connecting, again, just that data and information sharing across state lines and putting our North Carolina partners in touch with Virginia partners. And they're sharing data and information and ideas, and they're trying to figure out what the causes of the blooms are. At this point, there's a group that has a grant to study that. But maybe forward, when we get towards the solution aspect of that, that'll provide additional opportunities to work with partners in your area and ours downstream. Something we were also involved in the Chewan Basin was the Healthy Waters Initiative, and this is a partnership through the Virginia Natural Heritage Program and Virginia Commonwealth University, but they did a survey of the ecological health of streams, looking at both water quality data and fish assemblages, and that report was just recently released in 2016, but it was actually the first of its kind. It was funded through EPA through funds that are normally used for restoration activities, and this was more of a proactive approach towards protecting high-quality watersheds. So there may be, if there was interest in doing that sort of thing in this area, maybe something we can work with the Natural Heritage Program on moving forward. Going back to the outreach materials, I already mentioned this, we're having conversations with groups in your area, but again, just creating outreach materials that focus more specifically on this basin and the connections that you have to the system. I mentioned the River Basin publications. We have, there's a series that our Environmental Education Office has in North Carolina, and we worked with that Chewan Albemarle Watershed Roundtable to develop a series for the Virginia portion of the Chewan Basin, so maybe that's something we can support your efforts as well. And just kind of getting back to the value of the system and benefits associated with it, I didn't really go into the other resources in the system, but ag, I understand this area is, there's a lot of agriculture and forestry. Well, those are resources within the system and aspects of the system that provide benefits to your local economy and the local communities. So this is another estimate of, the benefits associated with those activities and including commercial fishing, exceeding $475 million annually. And you've heard a lot about the importance of forest and flood protection and storm damage reduction and others, but there are other ecosystem benefits that forests provide, carbon sequestration. So the report estimated and tried to attribute values associated with that for both forests and wetlands and seagrasses. And we understand, I'm placing a lot of emphasis on this because we understand that some of the local governments in our area have actually utilized this report in some of their comprehensive plan development processes. So we're trying to raise awareness that it's out there. We don't want it to just sit on a shelf. So if there's interest in using that or need for it, we just want to make sure that people know that it's out there. And we're already having discussions on our leadership council and boards have advised us to move forward with some additional economic studies. So we're looking at quantifying ecosystem services associated with storm damage reduction and water quality improvements from wetlands and submerged aquatic vegetation. And so one thing, we're just now starting to re-engage in these efforts. We actually haven't been as involved in sea level rise, resilience, and climate change efforts in the last couple of years. But we're re-engaging in these efforts, and our plan has actions that talk about assisting local governments and communities with incorporating consideration of resilience, climate change, and sea level rise into their local planning processes. We have a lot of partners that are active in this arena, and they're already sharing that information across state lines, so we're hoping to help further and support that moving forward. We're actually a partner on a grant with Virginia Institute of Marine Science. There's a coastal resilience grant where they're looking at quantifying the use of natural features for storm damage and flood reduction and building coastal resilience. So our role will be to see if that applies in North Carolina, and if not, is there a different method that we can work on together. But our partners at Virginia Sea Grant, I think some of you may know Michelle Covey, She's reached out across state lines and sharing some information that's being done right here in Virginia Beach, and reaching out to local governments and communities in northeastern North Carolina and just sharing what y'all have done here and any lessons learned on this end and how we might be able to use that information in other parts of the region. North Carolina Sea Grant, the town of Nax have been working together on planning processes, and you're doing a lot of outreach in the region, and same thing, just trying to share lessons learned and raise awareness. So we're hoping to hold some more workshops along those same lines in our area, and encourage you to just continue that information sharing. And so with that, just want to leave you with this slide. It's an EPA slide, just giving you some ideas of what you can do to protect estuaries. Things you can do at home and in your community and your yard, and just thinking again about what happens in your backyard and your connections to the watershed affect the rivers and sounds that exist downstream. So here's contact information. I encourage you to follow us on social media or join our mailing list. If you want to write a guest post about anything that you're doing in the region, let me know, and we'll be happy to share it. But thank you for having me, and thank the city again for including us in these efforts. Thank you.
I'm going to open the floor for some questions for Stacey tonight. I ask that you use the microphone though, because we are recording these, but if there are any questions for Stacey. All right, well, she will be here afterwards, and I'm sure all of you have great ideas, and please share them. I want to move on to our next speakers. So Dr. Tom Allen is a native of Richmond and Portsmouth. He attended IC Norcom High School in ODU and got a Bachelor of Science degree in Geography. He later earned a PhD in Geography from UNC Chapel Hill. He was a professor at ODU from 96 to 2006 and returned in 2016 after 10 years at East Carolina. His research and teachings focus on coastal geography, natural hazards, sea level rise, and the use of GIS and satellite remote sensing for environmental problems. Among his hobbies, he spends as much time as he can afford surfing in Virginia Beach and the Outer Banks. Let's welcome Dr. Tom.
And thanks for the invitation. It's been an excellent series, one that I've been able to attend. And Virginia Beach, really, you're setting an awareness, I think, that extends beyond your citizens on how you respond to sea level rise. So I have a co-speaker. It's not here yet. Are you there? Oh yeah. Okay. So, well, Aaron, I don't know if you want to come on up, Tal. It makes a lot more sense for Tal to speak before me, actually. So we're going to do a little tag team dance. Good.
So, Dr. Tal Ezer is a professor of ocean, earth, and atmospheric sciences at ODU. He earned a PhD in physical oceanography from Florida State University, a master's in atmospheric sciences from Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and a bachelor's in physics with a minor in math, also from Hebrew University. He spent almost 18 years at Princeton developing computer ocean circulation models, moved to Norfolk about 11 years ago to focus his research on issues that are important to the Hampton Roads region: the impact of climate change, sea level rise, and hurricanes on coastal flooding. Please welcome Dr.
Good evening, everyone. I'm sorry, I was a little bit late because of traffic from Norfolk. So you're all aware of flooding in this area. That's probably why you're all here. And in particular, it's quite interesting in recent years that we see this, what we call the clear day flooding, minor tidal flooding, when there is actually no storm in sight. So I'll try to tell you a little bit about the physics and the science of sea level rise and flooding. So what is the impact that we see in, on the coast? We have coastal erosion, we have saltwater intrusion into Virginia marshland that affects the ecosystem. We have a storm surge that is affected by sea level rise, so the damage and the cost is much larger because in addition to the storm surge, we also have sea level rise. And we have increase in frequency of flooding. So here are pictures, old picture from downtown Norfolk, from historical area in Norfolk. Most of the buildings there were built more than 100 years ago when sea level was much lower, maybe about 1.5 feet lower than what it is today. Today is a picture that I took a couple of years ago. Quite often we see this kind of flooding in this area, and this is now very common feature in this area. Now Norfolk, downtown Norfolk is protected by floodgates and flood wall, but a lot of the residential area around the city and also in Virginia Beach are not protected. If you look at the impact of flooding in the area, this is from a neighborhood, a Larchmont neighborhood near Norfolk, where they are lifting a lot of the houses in the whole neighborhood. They are lifting houses, and there is quite a large cost for lifting houses, maybe 100,000 or more. And if you look at the claim, flood damage claim, you see how they accelerate in recent years. So this is the impact that you see. Now, if you look at how much flooding we have, this is the number of hours of minor flooding that we see in Norfolk. And you see how the increase is really very dramatic. So in the past, until the 80s or so, we had no year had more than 100 hours of flooding. And most years had maybe 20 or so. Now we have almost every year, and last year we had about 300 hours of flooding. And this is mostly due to sea level rise. So when sea level rise, you don't need large storms to cause flooding. And so if you do some projection, what will happen in the future, this is what we had in the past. And this is, if you add sea level rise, that's how much flooding we may have in the future. So if in the past we had, until the 70s, maybe 1 day of flooding per year, now we have maybe 10 full days of flooding, and by 2050 we may have as much as 60 full days of, this is just minor flooding. This is not a large damage due to storm surge, but just minor flooding that blocks major roads, and cars are flooded, and there is damage and so forth. So let me tell you a little bit about the science of sea level rise. So what we look here is what we call the local sea level rise. So the local sea level rise is affected first by the global sea level rise. And the main reason for global sea level rise is the thermal expansion. When the water are warmer, they take more volume, and sea level rises. Also, there is melting of glaciers and ice over land that increase the volume of the ocean. Another thing that affects especially our area is the land motion. And some of it is actually depends on something that happened tens of thousands of years ago, when North America was covered by ice, especially in Canada, in the north part of the States. So the weight of the ice pushed the land in Canada down, and our area here in Virginia and North Carolina was going up. And after the glaciers disappeared, now there is a rebound where our land is starting slowly to sink. So at the same time that global sea level is rising, our land is sinking. So that's why the rate of sea level rise in our area is about 2 times larger than what the global sea level rise is. Now the third component of sea level rise is much more complicated, and this is the area that I've been doing a lot of research on. This is the ocean and atmospheric dynamics that affect the coast. And what you see here, this is the image from satellite. The red color is warm water from the south by the Gulf Stream. This is a very strong ocean current. This ocean current, for example, takes the amount of water that it brings is more than all the rivers on Earth combined. And this strong ocean current actually can affect our coast. And this is one of the areas that I've been doing research on in recent years. So I'll try to explain to you without getting into too much technical details, so you can understand what's going on here. Now the issue of, so this is part of the research that I've been doing that is not still well understood. But it did get the attention of the public earlier this year. On the front page of the Virginian pilot, there was a story about the Gulf Stream, a wild card for sea level rise that describes some of this research. So here you see the strong current, the Gulf Stream flowing around, and it changes all the time. And while the Gulf Stream flow and location is changing, it actually affects our coast here. And I try to explain to you how this is happening. Now, the Gulf Stream has been people were excited about this strong current all the way back from Benjamin Franklin. He was one of the first that actually charted this flow of the current because he wanted to speed up the mail by sailboats from Americas to Europe. So if they can catch a ride on this strong current, they can get to Europe faster. So how does this work? Why these ocean currents that actually occur hundreds of miles away from us in the ocean, how can it affect the coastal sea level here? So the idea is that sea level is actually not level. There are bumps in the ocean, and in particular, because of the rotation of the Earth, in places where you have very strong current, is also strong slope. So in a way, these strong currents that flow north along our coast pulls water away from our coast. So without this strong ocean current, the sea level in Virginia Beach would have been about 3 to 5 feet higher than what it is today. So thanks to the Gulf Stream, your sea level is smaller than what it would have been without this ocean current. So what happens when it slows down? Your sea level is going up. So any motion and change in this strong current offshore can affect the coast. And we know from science that under warmer climate, the ocean circulation is going to slow down. So one of the results will be slow down of the Gulf Stream, and this means that our coast will be more in danger because of this ocean current that you don't even see, but it will affect your area. So what you see here, so I looked at some data. So this has been, there was a theory that the Gulf Stream can affect our area for many, many years ago. But only recently we had enough measurements to actually show what's going on. So what you see here, this is a record of long changes in sea level at different locations inside the Chesapeake Bay, also along the Atlantic coast. And what's interesting here, this is like the long-term changes over the years. But interesting that all these stations, both in the Chesapeake Bay and on the coast, show this the same pattern. So how can places very different, like Baltimore in the upper Chesapeake Bay and Atlantic City along the New Jersey coast, show similar pattern? So what we decided to look at satellite data, and the satellite data can measure the strength of this ocean current. So when we look at the ocean current, we got the strength from the satellite, but we found out that whenever we have a few years where this current is slowing down, we have higher than normal water level and more flooding in the area. Another year where the ocean current gets weaker and we have more flooding. In recent years, we have this decline in the current and acceleration in sea level. And there is a very high correlation between the two. Now, another interesting thing that we found out, so this happened over a relatively long period of years. We often see this kind of a clear day flooding in Norfolk. And we noticed in 2015, we had several weeks of flooding in Norfolk. Almost every day in high tide, the downtown street of Norfolk had flooding, and I'm sure that in Virginia Beach, we had the same problem of many roads that were flooded. And at the same time, there was no storm, there were any hurricane or storm close to us, but there was a hurricane, Joaquin, that was far, far away in the Atlantic. And what we found out, we thought that maybe this hurricane actually affects ocean currents, and then the ocean currents affect our coast. So to check if the theory is correct, we found out there is a cable, an old telephone cable between South Florida and the Bahamas. And they found out that by looking at the connectivity across this old cable, they can actually calculate these currents that flow off the coast of Florida. So we look at this data. And what we found out, what you see here on the top, this is a sea level from Norfolk. And you see the tides going up and down, but in this period, when the hurricane was far away in the Atlantic, we see this flooding, and you see high sea level. The red is observed sea level much higher than normal. And you had a lot of flooding in Norfolk, also in Virginia Beach. So what you see here, this cable in Florida, this is in blue is a measurement of this strength of this current. And at the same time that we had all this flooding, we saw that this current became weaker at the same time. They're all correlated to each other. So what we think was happening is this storm that was far away from us did not affect us directly, but it disturbed the ocean currents, and then the ocean current change actually affected our area, which was hundreds and hundreds of miles away actually from the storm. And then a year later, you probably, if you live in Virginia Beach, you probably know about Hurricane Matthew that caused a lot of flooding in Virginia Beach. And again, during this period, we saw almost every high tide, every day. We had 2 floods every day for a long period of time. And again, when we look at the ocean currents in blue here, we saw this drop of 50% in the ocean current at the same time when we had all this flooding in our area. So what we thought is that maybe, again, Hurricane Matthew didn't reach our area. It was going along the coast of the Carolinas and then went offshore, farther away from us, but it still had impact on our area. It also brought a lot of rain. A lot of the flooding in Virginia Beach caused by a large amount of rain that happened within a short period of time. So what we did is, since I'm a computer ocean modeler, so I decided to model the ocean and the hurricane on a computer. So what I did, I modeled what happened when Hurricane Matthew propagated in our area. So Hurricane Matthew actually started here. It went along the coast and made a lot of damage and flooding in the Carolinas. And then it actually went offshore. And a week or so after the hurricane already moved farther away from the coast. But what happened, that we found out, that along the coast, all the red is where sea level is higher than normal. So even many days after the hurricane, especially in our area, we are sitting here in Virginia Beach, all the area of the Chesapeake Bay had much higher than normal water level, even many days after the hurricane disappeared. And what happened, you had all this large amount of rain, all the streets were flooded, but they could not drain because the water level, they have to drain into the ocean. The water level was already high enough, so they could not drain. So you probably are aware of the issues. So there were several stories about Hurricane Matthew in Virginia Beach and the problem of drainage system. But in addition to the problem of the drainage system, we had this additional influence that because sea level remained higher than normal for several days after the hurricane, the floods from the heavy rain could not be drained. So part of the blame was not just on the drainage system that maybe need to be fixed, but on ocean dynamics and things that happen in a way that you don't really see. So if you look at our area here, these are all the areas that are under danger of flooding, with sea level continue to rise, and you can see those areas in the Virginia Beach area that are in danger, as well as in Norfolk. So what can we do? So one of the things that first thing to do is to be able to measure how much flooding there is and to warn the citizens when flooding is coming. So one of the ways to monitor the flooding is by water level sensors. And some of the water level sensors, this is how they look. They work on the solar panels. And one of them is located here this is the downtown area of Norfolk. This is the Virginia Opera House here. And this picture I just took a few weeks ago when we had a high tide. And you can see, so this sensor actually measures the depth of the water, and you can actually see the water level in particular streets almost in real time. So eventually, citizens can look at their iPhone and get the depths to see what streets in the neighborhood are flooded. Now, similar sensors are actually located in several places around Virginia Beach. And what they show us that each area is actually flooded in some different way. For example, in the Brock Center area, the sensor, what it shows is mostly the tide. So the flooding here in this area may be due to the high tide. And during this period, during Hurricane Florence, we had higher than normal tides in the area. So some areas just flooded because of the tide. In other places, where you have a closed park here, there was a lot of rain here, and it took a long period of time for all the rains that accumulated to drain from the system. In other places, we have inflow of the wind. There is a strong wind that pushes water into the rivers. It can accumulate and create flooding up the river. So we have to take into account all these influence. Now we were kind of lucky during Hurricane Florence, but North Carolina and South Carolina had much more difficulty. It happened that one of these sensors was located actually in the western side of North Carolina, and that's where all the rainfall that fell on North and South Carolina. So you see how much there is a huge amount of rain. And this sensor was located in one of the rivers up here in the mountains. And you can see within a short period of time, the river level goes by 7 feet. So if you have the house near the river, you probably go in big trouble, and a lot of people in North Carolina that are now still suffering from the impact of the storm. So this is the end of my part of the talk, and I think Tom Allen will continue telling you about the Virginia Beach area.
Don't go far, Tom. They're going to be after us for both of the questions. So, yeah, for my tack on the talk, I'm going to focus more on the watershed and the terrestrial side. to complement Tal on the oceanography and climate side of it. So here we are, if you can find yourself there, this is a nice Google Earth shot. We do want to bring in this side of extremes because in the context of global climate change and sea level rise, we are seeing a lot more extremes. And it's not just in terms of hurricanes, which may not be getting more numerous, but may be getting stronger. Not great for us in a number of respects, but also potentially nor'easters. So that side of the equation is still an area of investigation. We have to understand the mechanisms. So when we see more sensors going out, it has practical application. I'll have some other technologies to show you at the end of my talk, but it also gives us more data to improve the modeling. We also have this sort of focus on water right now, but there's also droughts, heat waves, and other sort of co-evolving aspects of climate that when we go to see a sea level rise map in 2050, 2070, the other aspects of the climate are going to be different at the same time. And when Stacey was showing you North Carolina, or you see images or events in South Carolina, even Florida, but in the back of your mind, we might have a more Florida-like climate here by the time sea level reaches some of these elevations. And this is kind of fits an idea of sort of tropicalization by geographic shifts. So I'm trying not to turn this into the Armageddon side of the talk, but keep an open mind as much as you can. And I like that Stacey brought in the idea of agriculture, forestry. The natural resources that we have in the southern watersheds are huge, and not just on the aquatic, but on the terrestrial side, the soils and the crop. Those are also kind of posed to see increased risk with not just sea level salinization, but with increased strength of tropical storms, timber damage, crop losses, and so forth. Haven't quite seen the data on that yet for North Carolina, except I think hogs, 6,000 hogs, and maybe 3.5 million chickens in North Carolina, unfortunately. History, a number of the talks already have shown interesting history and data captured from this. I won't go into that, except North Carolina, where I was working. We have a history just since colonial times of more than 50 inlets, opening and closing, and that's a way that the estuaries have been kind of breathing. The barrier islands actually use inlets as a process in the retreat. It's a transfer of sediment from the ocean to the sound side, and we have a system here that has some of that at play. A number of kind of rescue operations and digitization projects are underway. I think the city and the refuge and some consultants have been involved with that to digitize and capture shorelines. We can make better measurements of the long-term rate of shoreline erosion by having some pretty high-quality early scientific maps. The Office of Coast Survey, the Coast Guard, NOAA, that's one of our earliest scientific agencies in the United States and even the world to some respect. So that's something that I know we're interested in at ODU. Without going into my coastal geography or oceanography kind of lecture, there's a picture of an inlet with a flood tide delta. So the incoming tide carrying sediment, ocean water, and fish, and many things with that. But the interesting thing about False Cape, Sandbridge, this side is it's a complex barrier island. A lot of that area has been an inlet at one point in time or other over the past 6,000-ish years. And if you look at geologically in the strata, you can actually see the deposits of inlets. Some parts of that island are very thin, narrow, and low elevation, and vulnerable to an inlet opening. Think of somewhere along on the outer banks, like Pea Island, north of Rodanthe, perhaps. Other areas are high. You've got multiple high dunes naturally. Now, not forgetting that in the 1930s and 40s, people were driving dune buggies all over the place, and who knows what else. But there's a history there. But there's a fairly natural state and a lot of interesting history to that. I mentioned surfing earlier. I grew up early in my surfing career dodging stumps in the surf in Sandbridge. That's a hazard you don't hear a whole lot about. Finding peat washed up on the beach. Offshore Sandbridge, there and False Cape are ancient kind of paleo ridges where there used to be an inlet, and sand dunes had built out. And then sea level rose up, kind of accelerated for a short period of time, and buried them. That's an oceanographer, Don Swift, some of his early work in the 70s in this area. And there's a cross-section here at the bottom showing, you have a relatively stable barrier island now in southern Virginia Beach through Currituck, but there, at the same time, it's in an equilibrium that is kind of apt to be upset. It depends on sediment coming ashore from offshore on the continental shelf or waxing and waning north and south. We just had a large swell dodging Hurricane Florence that helped carry sand up toward Falls Cape. But most of the time, the sediment is drifting south toward the Outer Banks in our area. Another thing about Back Bay that's a little bit interesting, compared to other lagoons up and down the whole East Coast, even other places in the world, and it is got a connection to the ocean. It's right now kind of distant. Stacey mentioned like Oregon Inlet. That's a long way to go from Back Bay out into the ocean. But in recent time, historic times, it wasn't so far. There was Currituck Inlet, right around the North Carolina-Virginia border. As a result, now being closed off, we have a kind of confined freshwater system. You've heard this before, maybe if you attended some of the other talks, but that is apt to change. And I took a quote from one of the early scientists recently. We're doing a lot of work on coastal lagoons, and he has this quote, "Coastal lagoons are common but ephemeral coastal landscape features." And so that's something that's, say, ephemeral, not forever. And there's a little view, just take the Google Earth image up, got Back Bay, Knott's Island. Look at the southern portion of Back Bay, and you see how choked this lagoon is with salt marshes. They have been very stable for the last several decades with minuscule erosion rates, but increasing in the last couple of years, notably along the refuges. Those are basically constrained storm surges moving north and south. And they capture sediment as well. This is actually where there was an inlet, the most recent Currituck Inlet. And you can see dunes that were on the north side of the inlet. This is the flood tide delta. So if we want to be interesting to see reducing storm surge, think of nature-based natural features that can protect us. Pay close attention to the fate of these marshes. To the north, that might surprise some people, you have vastness of Cape Henry, First Landing, and so on. All of that's occurred during sea level rise. We have massive accretion, deposition. You can't have erosion without having deposition somewhere else. Something I learned from colleague George Ortel, an ODE professor, now retired. But we did a paper looking at mapping hundreds of beach ridges and dunes over a 3,000-4,000 year period. All of this was sediment out in front of oceanfront Virginia Beach. And if you do the math, it's about a 6 foot per year erosion rate that produced this hundreds of millions of cubic meters of sediment. Off to the south, Virginia Beach kind of stabilized, and we do a lot of beach replenishment, but to the south, we're kind of on borrowed time. If we try to hold the line there, we have to be paying close attention. To our north, we have a series of coastal bays. Let's kind of skip the capes and go up to Chincoteague Bay, the Maryland coastal bays. They have some problems that we haven't quite had in terms of severe algal blooms, nutrient pollution, hypoxia, other things, kind of toxins accumulating. Chincoteague Bay is interesting. It's got 2 inlets, but it has some analogies to Back Bay that are kind of interesting. It's a much smaller watershed, but it's also very choked. So we kind of have an interest in looking at these things kind of systematically side by side. You go way south of Florida, there's the St. Johns River and Indian River Lagoon, another national estuary program that was mentioned, I think, on a map, shown on a map earlier by Stacey. They've had ecosystem die-off, devastation. You might have seen some other things in Florida recently that are kind of like make your skin crawl. I don't need to repeat the awesome introduction on sea level rise, except that when I show some maps of where the system might go, they're bracketed as to it depends on the acceleration, it depends on the Gulf Stream, ice sheet melt out, the thermal expansion, and so on. So this system might be prone to hiccups along the way, short slowdowns and slight accelerations. I made this map. Stacey, we had the problem. We showed this at the Symposium last spring, had it out big display. I had to get data from multiple states and USGS and agencies to make a map that combined the two areas. But this simply color codes areas by their elevation above current mean sea level in terms of might be vulnerable. You can probably know some of these. The grayscale is interesting because that's elevation in feet. So the lighter color, brighter is higher elevation. And if you look carefully in here, you see lots of variations in there that are the landforms of where sea level has already been before. Just to the west, I cut it off, but there's a Suffolk Scarp. There's a paleo shoreline of preceding interglacial, hundreds of thousands of years ago. But you do have these ridges and other things that inherit the soils and elevations. They dictate to some degree where our floodplains are going to be. The next series of maps are from NOAA. It's called a sea level rise viewer. It just showed a 1 foot increment. It'll turn things blue, and you can see, barring other innovations, where water may go, up to about 3 feet, 4 feet. We could go more than that, but those could be shallow areas in it. Again, barring no changes, being human interventions in particular, but also things like marshes. If the marshes have a continual supply of sediment, they could keep up with sea level rise for some period of time. And so the take-home story might be, what can we do to buy time? Preserve the ecosystem protection and services, and also reduce flooding. So one of these things that I do is research on salt marshes and how they respond. I map them from satellite imagery, and so I have a kind of cross-section here, and I use a computer model that sort of projects those in the future. So here's another series of maps. It will sort of blend through time. Today, the green is swamp forest. The kind of magenta pinkish colors are salt marshes primarily. So they're going up 1.5 feet, 2 feet. And you see an inexorable creeping motion of marshes on the move, up those gradual faint slopes. You also will see marshes melting away or fragmenting as we go up to 3.5 feet, maybe 4.5 feet toward the end of the century, potentially. You see quite a bit of system change here. And then it's a foot back to kind of present to future. So we're going beyond our own generations, mine included, about what may happen. Well, that's marshes. Other things that are kind of hidden. Research hasn't addressed a lot of these things. What about those septic systems? Most of eastern North Carolina is on septic systems. And right below them, there's hopefully an aerated portion of the soil that allows the decomposition in septic systems to take place. But the water table on the groundwater is rising. And we actually have a concern there that even before some areas become directly flood impacted, they might be affected by the septic system failure. Upper parts of the Chesapeake Bay are experiencing this right now in Matthews County, the Northern Neck. It's actually leading to bacteria in affecting multi-million-dollar shellfish aquaculture operations. So that's a creeping, looming threat. And it's an expensive problem to solve, to extend sewer lines or to build these mound-based systems. But solutions are kind of out there. Another thing from North Carolina, ditches were dug extensively to drain farmland, the farmland was then cultivated, got extensive potato farms and soybeans and turf farms and other things, but those ditches are now conduits for saltwater in parts of the Pamlico. So that's an issue. Other marshes were cut through to drain them a little bit to reduce mosquito populations. But again, now kind of a conduit. So yeah, this is how the Armageddon looked like, right? So balance that out with another solution. In North Carolina, there's been an aggressive approach with the Nature Conservancy and Fish and Wildlife in particular to take a very careful hydrologic control approach. So they have these gates that were hopefully not interfering with fish passages and some things, but to try and limit to reduce that salinity moving up into the farmland and into the more brackish and fresh marshes. So there's a lot of care done into where these things are being installed and monitoring their efficacy, and that could translate into our watersheds. We're making more measurements. So with aerial photography, satellite imagery, this spike is just showing 2-year difference in some shoreline erosion. This is in the Pamlico Sound, and measurements that were made. I'm sorry, this is meters. This is what we're using, but we actually measured, 20 meters of erosion. That's melting away. And we're trying to understand why is this happening in some areas and not others. So again, it has to do with the hydrology. It has to do with the sediment that's underneath that. In North Carolina, they have tens of 20, 30, 40 feet thick peat. It's all marsh that has built up. Parts of Back Bay, they have that. We don't have a whole lot of data on that. Parts of it may be underlaid by sand on the back barrier side. It may be much more resilient. So we worked in North Carolina to make a lot of high precision baseline maps of shorelines in order to better measure and predict these change rates in the future. They actually have an awesome inventory of infrastructure, everything from docks and bulkheads and other kind of structures. Some of my work has been looking for other little vulnerabilities. I showed you that elevation map a minute ago, the grayscale map, and that has error in it. It's not actually super precise. And if there's one little part of the elevation, maybe it's a sand dune that's not accurate, water will breach through and flow through it. And so this is an area down in Manio where we actually had that. It's a slight chance that if your elevation map has an error here or here, water will break through. Think of New Orleans and a break in a levee is a pretty dramatic thing. So those are the kind of things we're working on. And it's closer to home. This is Moyoc. So this is a simulation of storm surge coming into Moyoc. Our focus really was the farmland and suburban areas, massive expansion there. And the purple is areas inundated as would be expected, but we noticed in maps that it was underestimating the area of flooding. So we went back and said, well, it looks like the ditches are not represented adequately in the elevation data. So we basically manipulated the data, put ditches into the elevation maps, and reran the simulation. So with that, the area that shows up in red is the area that we're actually better mapping. We're not omitting accidentally the flood mapping. And if there's anything we want to err on the side of caution is don't underrepresent flooding. Okay? Precautionary principle. You can even see like floods coming up the ditches, and these are this is tile drainage in farm cropland. It's very subtle, low relief elevation. And the little map there, I'm very sorry for my friends in New Hanover County, Wilmington, a number of them actually. But we actually mapped sub-watersheds at an ultra-fine scale. I believe the city's now doing this too, at Virginia Beach at least. Currituck County is trying to get into that, I think. That actually, if you do that at finer scale, you find out where your real problem areas are. And then you can direct solutions more precisely. the military can do this and send armaments into narrow nooks and crannies. We can apply similar technology to finding this solutions here. So on that score, we're flying drones. I know the USGS has been getting into this. The city, I think emergency management or stormwater has been doing some. And at ODU, we're trying to step up some research and instruction on that area. So in a nutshell, don't take the gloom and doom. You know, I know the city has a number of stormwater research projects underway with some consultants in NOAA. So I'm in touch with them and very eager to see that they actually sort of raise the bar and set a new standard. And the university, APNEP, is eager to kind of collaborate. I think a lot of the solutions are actually going to require that partnership activity and better sharing of information. The Latin quote, the pithy quote that I like to share with you is one of my favorites. Scientiae sedit mare. The sea yields only to knowledge. It's kind of hard to argue with that. Okay, thank you for your time. And this will take
Okay, folks, we have time, actually we have some time for questions. Again, if you'll use the microphone, come on up and, come on, just, there we go.
Hi, Bob Kugler from Virginia Beach. The question deals again with the Humboldt current, or the current that you talked about, and the slowing. You mentioned that tornado or hurricanes could actually reduce it by 50%, the flow rate. But without hurricanes, how much is slowing just because of glaciers melting and all? Is that a significant figure?
Okay, this is a good question. There are variations in the storm current on different scales. On one hand, you have short-term fluctuations, and you have a hurricane, or sometimes just natural variability from day to day, from week to week, because the ocean is not stable, it's changing all the time. But on the long term, over decades, there is a slowdown process that's part of long-term climate change that happened because of the melting of ice and general climate change that affects ocean circulation. So both are affected, but some will affect you on a short term within weeks or days, and some will affect you in the next decade or century. I hope this answers your question.
Yes, it does, and therefore you're saying that over 2 or 3 decades, the speed might reduce by 10 or 20%?
Could be, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Other questions? All right, well, how about another round first? I want to thank everybody for coming out. It's been a long couple of weeks here. I will assure you that I just checked the tide gauges down south. They're still dropping. So roads are opening up. I really appreciate everybody's time and interest in these symposiums. They are available online, so I encourage you guys to spread the word. Thank you again.